I am Courtney Crandon, and this is my special education interviews for EDL 853. I interviewed the paraprofessional, a special education teacher, and an administrator. The paraprofessional and administrator work in the same building. The special education teacher works for the same district but is in a different building, and I had to interview her for the answers, whereas the para and the administrator were in-person interviews. For the child find procedures, they definitely all mentioned that the concern is brought to the child study team and that parents are notified, then the kid is tested. The paraprofessional talked about that the special education student is identified, then the parents notified, then the testing begins. Then, of course, we continue them into normal activities until we can get them accommodated and get their IEP written. Special education teacher talked about how it can be the teacher or the parent that voices a concern. It's not always the teacher, it's not always parent, it just depends on the situation. It also could be not their regular ed teacher, maybe somebody else in the building that voices their concern. That concern then goes to the child study team where they have a meeting about the student. The parents get involved, testing, screening process begins, and then they make their plan for interventions, accommodations, whatever it may be that student needs. The administrator also talked about that it is brought to their attention by different people. It's not always the same. It's not always reg ed teacher. It's not always the parent. It just depends on the situation. Same thing then, that the concerned child is brought to the child study team. They have a meeting, discuss it. Parents get involved. The child is then tested, and then those interventions begin again. So the special ed teacher and administrator had very similar answers. Oops. Some of their most challenging roles, the paraprofessional talked about having to remember to that, of course, that every child is different and each child has their own accommodations. Not everything is going to work for each child. They have different needs. She also talked about that she had to keep up with some kids because they were always going, always wanting to learn, and then sometimes she would have to slow down with other kids. So again, just that every child is different. And she talked about that every day is different. She comes in and one child might be acting different than they did before or the day before. So every child is different, every day is different. Then the special education teacher talked about they get new kids all the time, new challenges, everything's always changing. She has to stay up to date with the laws and regulations. And then again, kind of like the paraprofessional said, remembering each student's accommodations because every student is different and they see a bunch of students. Then she also talked about getting helpful staff. Sometimes they can get paras that aren't always as great as they would like them to be. The administrator talked about having to fill those requests of the parents. Sometimes parents have requests that are either too outrageous or just don't follow their policy or their laws, but she does the best that she can. Also having sometimes to get parents involved. She said sometimes it's pulling teeth to get those parents involved. And then again, keeping up with regulations. The most rewarding part of the job, they kind of all said watching the student grow, watching the student have those moments of, oh, I get it. The paraprofessional said when they can jump over a hurdle on their own, meaning that something they've been stuck on for a long time and they can finally get over it. And same kind of a thing, seeing improvement and watching them learn. The special ed teacher, again, similar with seeing that light bulb moment. She loves all the hugs that she gets from some of her students and then seeing them grow from year to year. The administrator, she talked about, again, seeing each student grow. She really gets to see them grow over the years. Some of them she's been watching since kindergarten. And then she also really enjoys watching her staff. She said she has some great special education staff. She has great paras, and she loves to watch them do their job even with the challenges they are handed. For advice that they have on supervision of special education staff, paraprofessional really talked about communicating with the teacher, not being afraid to step in, not being afraid of being corrected. Of course, a para not always has been to school, is not as educated on special education, so of course there are going to be some things that they don't know. So she really talked about having to be patient and not being afraid to ask questions. The SPED teacher talked about having that patience, and then again, knowing how to communicate. She has to communicate to her paras, to the parents, to the staff, to the administration. So really knowing how to communicate, and then not being afraid to collaborate and listen to others. Sometimes we try to take on roles all on our own. She said as a special education teacher, it's really important to get ideas from others because you don't always know how they're doing throughout the day, that student. And then she said being organized is very helpful. Administrators talked about knowing the policies, knowing the rules, not for only your school, but the whole district. Knowing how to document, and then having a lot of trust in that special education teacher, because the special education teacher is the specialist. How do you work effectively with parents? The paraprofessional said she didn't have much parent time. They usually go to the teacher. The SPED ed teacher talked about that you have to be understanding. A lot of times parents are really trying to help their students. They might not always know how, so definitely communicating as much as possible, help them come up with that plan, and making sure they know that IEP. The administrator talked again about being understanding. You need to listen to those parents. Administrator also talked about there are definitely some parents that have some off-the-wall requests, and that she has to tell them that they can't do that. So she said remaining calm, because sometimes parents can get very frustrated, maybe passionate about their students. So she has to remain calm, communicate when she can, all the time, and then be an open door, so someone that people can always come to. How do you work with regular ed teachers with students with special needs? The para really had a lot because she's in the regular ed classrooms more often with those students, so she does whatever she can to help. She sometimes reminds the teachers of the accommodations, because again, the teachers, yes, they know that there are accommodations. Sometimes they have 25 other students, maybe 5 that are special ed, so it's nice to have that para there that can help them. Then they refer to the special education teacher if there's a big question or a major problem. Special education teacher talks about giving them resources and materials when needed, whenever she can provide those materials and resources, or even just suggesting some resources, and then definitely collaborating and communicating as often as possible. The administrator talked about to, again, help them remember the accommodations and their IE plan, give guidance, and making sure that they are included in the process. What advice do you have for a first-year administrator? Paraprofessional talked about remember all of your staff. Some principals kind of forget about the paras or staff that isn't just teachers, so she talked about remembering all of the staff and be able to work with everybody, communicate, again, be an open door. The SPED teacher talked about being available, communicating, and she also talked about remember we are real people. Sometimes teachers get things dumped on them. They're not babysitters, they are teachers. So she kind of harped on that a little bit. Administrators or the administrator that I interviewed talked about being a good listener, communicator, and a good leader. She talked about that remembering SPED teachers are the experts. A lot of times she kind of steps back and lets the SPED teacher do her thing because they're the experts. They went to school for it. They know exactly what they are doing. And then building those positive relationships. Describe the role of a SPED teacher and the building principal. SPED teacher, the paraprofessional talked about the SPED teacher, and his job is to work directly with those students and to work directly with the Reg Ed teacher. They need to discover what those students need, what accommodations they have, and make sure that they are getting those accommodations. Then the principal is just kind of there to assist and is a great resource when there are questions. The SPED teacher talked about, working closely with the students to find out their needs and help them, and also help the Reg Ed teachers. And she really talked about that making their experience at school better is her main goal. She wants her students to be successful, so whatever she can do, that's her job. The principal is there to sit in on IEP meetings and assist when needed. So again, she's there for support, and if there's a question, the SPED teacher knows she can always go to her administrator. The administrator talked about that the SPED teacher is the sole person in charge of working with the students, and knowing what is best for them, knowing what will help them in the classroom, what will help them at home, things like that. And then she talked about that her job is to assist when needed, be a good communicator and collaborator. So a lot of them had the same answer on that question. What characteristics do you seek in an aspiring administrator with regards to special education? The paraprofessional would love to see someone who listens. She did talk about that her administrator right now is an open door, is someone that can listen. She's had administrators in the past that were not that way, so she definitely wants someone who can listen and is a people person, does not just shut their door, but wants to talk to the teachers, the staff, the students, the parents, everybody. And of course is a good leader. The SPED teacher talked about the administrator being a good team player, someone teachers, students, and parents can approach. So again, that open door method, and then understands the needs of all the children, staff, parents, community, and treats everybody equally. Then the administrator talked about that her role is to be a role model, problem solver, communicator, listener, and definitely a leader. She says she does everything that she can to be the best leader that she can be. And that is all. Thank you.